Alright, why don't we read from a short section of Roar of the Ganges, a book that we've been reading together. Maybe after Crystal Sierra asks me what my favorite dream is, and I answer before she explodes. I like dream school. I seem to have a recurring dream where I am being taught new things that you can do in your dreams. The first was flying, learning how to fly. Then I learned how to turn invisible. And I learned how to make objects float. Dream school is very cool, and I'm very honored to attend it. So this is a book we have been reading a few pages at a time, called Roar of the Ganges. It was gifted to us by a fellow Sanghi, Sky Guardian. Swami Tadatmanandaji, the author, is actually his guru that he meets up with in person every week and attends satsangs of. And Sky Guardian has asked his guru to sign his book for us with prayers and best wishes on behalf of the Sangha for all of us to read. And I asked if it would be okay if I encouraged you to buy it, and Swamiji said, you don't have to. It's going to be a free PDF soon. So how thoughtful is that? It takes place in India, where Swamiji was not a Swami yet, a spiritual renunciant. He was a spiritual seeker, a brahmacharya, who is one who basically is a student of spirituality. They have not yet taken monastic vows. This chapter is called Way of the Ancients. It was a timeless scene. A saffron-robed Swami sat cross-legged on the floor, reciting ancient Sanskrit verses, precisely following the intonations that had been passed down through hundreds of generations. Before him sat 20 white-robed students, their backs erect, all eyes fixed on their teacher. They were learning a hymn from the Vedas in praise of Lord Shiva. The Swami proceeded methodically. He recited each passage slowly and clearly, inflecting each syllable with its proper pitch, low, middle, or high. He then listened carefully as the students repeated the passage twice, chanting in unison. If he detects any mistakes in pronunciation from even one student, he made them all repeat the passage. When everyone could chant it without error, he continued with the next passage. Neither the teacher nor the student used books. The Swami had memorized this hymn long ago when he had learned it in an identical setting. This particular scene took place not in an ancient India, but in the Swami Dayananda ashram. It was Swami Prakash's chanting class. Had it not been for the modern classroom illumined by fluorescent tubes instead of oil lamps, it could easily be imagined to be happening in 1500 BC. The Vedas arose before the widespread use of written language in India. The well-defined meters and melodic inflections of their verses served two purposes: to make memorization easier and to help prevent accidental corruption of the original as it was passed on from generation to generation. Customarily, young boys underwent rigorous training in traditional Gurukula, where they lived with their teacher for 12 years to master the Vedas. Some students would later establish their own Gurukulas and teach the next generation of students. A meticulous oral tradition preserved the Vedas in their original form until, after many centuries, they were finally written on stacks of palm leaves. Even today, boys still enter Gurukulas to learn the Vedas in this way and to prepare themselves for priestly duties. Little is known about the origin of the Vedas. Presumably, inspired sages living in high mountain retreats or along the banks of sacred rivers conceived the ancient scriptures. With divine inspiration, they composed lofty hymns of praise, worshipping Shiva, Vishnu, Agni, Vayu, and other forms in which they worshipped God. They formulated detailed instructions for the performance of complicated rituals. They devised meditation techniques and originated profound philosophical teachings. All of this was eventually compiled into 4 books: the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. The word Veda literally means knowledge. Some of the ancient sages are mentioned by name in the Vedas themselves. Sages like Yajnavalkya, the great ascetic who lived with his wives in the forest, as well as others like Bharadvaja, Pipalada, and Angiras. Yet, we know little about their lives. Based on scriptural references and linguistic evidence, scholars believe they probably lived 1,000 to 2,000 years before the birth of the Christ. These sages were known as rishis, seers, because they saw or discovered what others could not, perhaps as a result of their intense austerities, fervent prayers, and deep meditations. Their teachings are considered to be revealed knowledge. Such knowledge is not of human origin, but rather divinely inspired, in the same way that the Bible's Old Testament is said to be the inspired word of God as received by the prophets. A mythological story found in later texts describes the origin of the Vedas in this way. Lord Shiva wanted to bring spiritual knowledge into the world. For the sake of imparting that wisdom, he assumed the form of a youthful teacher and sat at the foot of a banyan tree. Around him gathered 4 elderly sages: Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanatsujata. They sat facing north, the direction symbolizing knowledge and immortality. Lord Shiva sat facing south, the direction representing ignorance and death. Therefore, this form of Lord Shiva is known as Dakṣiṇāmūrti, the south-facing Dakshina form, Murti, of God. Lord Dakṣiṇāmūrti taught the sages without uttering a single word, for mere words could not convey the truths he came to impart. Yet, in that sacred silence, the sages received the wisdom that would be passed down through the generations in the form of the Vedas. The gist of this story is that the wisdom of the Vedas comes not from the rishis, but from God. According to the Vedic tradition, knowledge cannot be invented. It can only be discovered. All knowledge is said to have been created when the universe was created, and has therefore existed from the beginning of time, waiting to be discovered. In this way, the ultimate source of all knowledge is traced back to the source of the universe, to God. Yet, the authority of Vedic teachings does not depend solely upon their age or origin. The antiquity of a teaching does not guarantee its validity. The ancient Greeks, for example, thought that the brain's primary purpose was to cool the blood like a radiator. Such ancient notions were mistaken. Nor does a highly esteemed origin guarantee a scripture's validity. For instance, not all the musical pieces composed by Mozart and Beethoven turned out to be exquisite works of art. Some were judged mediocre by those composers themselves. Ultimately, the validity of Vedic teachings depends not upon their age or origin, but upon their content. And that content is the foundation for Hindu religious and spiritual culture, a culture spanning thousands of years and embraced by one of every 6 people on the planet today. Now, with that lovely introduction to the Vedas, humanity's oldest scriptures on spirituality, science, philosophy, let us pause our reading there and begin to end our live stream. The camera is vibrating. It must be my mystic powers, or my phone alarm is going off and I have